So they go on and say, what is karma then? It is a learning process. Learning may be done two ways with man. He may learn a thing through experiencing it over and over again until it becomes part of his emotional self, or he may learn it intellectually by reasoning it out and then making it a part of his life. This second process is fairly new to man in terms of time. It is the result of the increase in size of the frontal lobes of the brain, and thus his increased ability to use his reasoning. In either case, when the lesson is learned and the inevitable testing comes, his response is going to be automatic because it's a part of who he is. Perhaps the best path to understanding would be to give some examples and then discuss the questions that those examples bring up. For the first example, we must go back in time to the southern plantations when slavery was at its prime. For this example, we use a plantation owner who considered all that he owned as property. That property included the slaves. There were owners who knew otherwise and acted accordingly, but for this example, those who thought of slaves as property are our focus. We will call one of those owners, Jim. Jim had wealth and slaves and used both the same way. In truth, Jim saw them both the same way. They were to be used to get what Jim wanted. They were both things. He did not think of slaves as human, and that was the lesson to be learned. The action was his abuse of slaves. The reaction was to come in a later life, even. Later life, notice that? The reaction was to come in a later life when Jim reincarnated as a black man during the time when the blacks were fighting for their rights. Jim learned very young what it was like to be treated as a thing or an object. He didn't like it. He spent his whole life, in truth, gave his life to teach others the lesson he had learned. Jim fought to bring the truth to Jim. How much fairer could it be? Some would say that Jim got his due in that second life, and that there is justice after all. We would say there is justice, but the intent was that Jim learned the right and wrong of his actions so that he might go on. You see what they said there? They said Jim was a slave owner and used the slaves to get what he wanted, just like he'd use money because they're both things. And bingo bango, he's reincarnated as a black man, black boy, obviously, black child, and didn't like it. He didn't like the way he was treated. And he turned around and fought and struggled and demanded to be treated like anybody else. And he gave his life for that concept. And they're saying there, how could it be any fairer than that? He didn't understand it. He came to understand it through the effect that was caused by the cause, and the cause was his abuse of slaves. They go to the second example, and they say, for the second example, we move to the time in Europe when man was king and woman was a thing to be used and then pushed out of the way. There was a man named Charles who was a chauvinist pig in its worst sense, going through life treating women like any other of his possessions. Through his whole life, he really believed that women were quite like his dogs, nice to have around when he needed them, but in the pen when he had other things to do. The action was his treatment of women. The reaction, and this is karmic reaction, was his rebirth several lifetimes later as a woman during the time when women's liberation was beginning its movement into man's awareness. As a woman, Charles felt the result of man's scorn for women, and he hated it. She entered the fight for equality and won many battles for her sex. Of course, as one might expect, her personal life was a mess due in part to her male-ish personality, but he did learn a lesson about women and about equality. Again, you might say that Charles got what he or she deserved in the second life and paid a price, a just one. We would say that Charles was given a chance, and an excellent chance at that, to learn the lesson needed to bring him to a more balanced state. He taught herself the lesson needed. Of course, the law of karma aren't always so dramatic nor easy to see, A person may learn music in a life never attaining any recognition and perhaps not even becoming very good. In her later life, that person may again be drawn by karma to music, and in this life go on to become a famous musician. Some would say that he was blessed with that talent, and we would say that he earned it. You understand, earned it because he had studied music and worked with music in an earlier lifetime, but never attained any goal, never attained any recognition, I guess you'd say. So then when he's born the next time, he just carried on from where he had been, and everybody said, oh, he's so talented right from birth, and oh, he's just so lucky. Lucky, they would say, earned it. That the we who gave us this would say. And they go on and say the lesson. He learned through experience that time does not exist as man understands time, and persistence does pay off. That is a lesson coming from the Prasanna's more cosmic view. And they go on and say, let's go on with some other examples not often seen as karmic in origin. A person in a life may wish to bring peace and stability to his homeland. He finds himself in a social position where he can effect little or no change at all. Still he struggles and fights with no success. In a later life, having learned those things needed, he finds himself a leader of that very country. It is now that he can make the decisions needed to bring the long sought-after peace and stability. That's another form of karma which I don't think most people recognize. These second examples aren't so harsh. Kind of show you that if you start something that, assuming that you get reincarnated, you may be able to carry on with it in a good form, what you call good karma, or making good karma, and then having it carry on into the next lifetime. It's still a cause. It's still an action. It's still something that happens. And there's going to be a reaction. The reaction is a reward for the hard work. The cause is doing something that doesn't seem to bear any fruit at all in the lifetime that you're in. So karma obviously has more of a cosmic view, a longer view, more than one lifetime view connected to it. They go on and say, another may learn after many years of struggle to control his appetite for alcohol. The lesson comes too late and he dies from the debilitating effects before he derives any benefit from learning that lesson. In a later life, karma brings him to a position where the fact that he can control his appetite for alcohol is the deciding factor for his placement in a job that he covets greatly. And then they go on and say, have you seen the two facets of karma yet? First, as a teacher of lessons by making man live both sides of the question. Second, as a teacher giving rewards for work well done. And then they say there is a third side. And they go on and discuss that then. Another aspect of karma is the balancing or bringing together of two opposites in a learning experience. By this we mean invariably a person who is extreme in one portion of his life will marry, have a son or a daughter, or come into contact in the workplace with a person who has an extreme in the opposite direction. Being forced together is one of the best ways for each to see the other's extreme and thereby move more toward the center. As you all know, the lessons can be resisted with inevitable conflict soon to follow. We have seen it happen in life all the time. We even make jokes about it as if it weren't really true. Now we may see it for what it truly is. The preacher's son is a hellraiser. The jock has a bookworm for a son. The wealthy have hippie children. Look around you. Haven't you seen this and many other examples? Doesn't this understanding of karma help make those things that were confusing more understandable? Isn't life a little clearer when viewed through the window of understanding given by karma? Then they go on to the next chapter, which is titled Questions. And they say, from those who have already read this work come some questions that seem to be universal. We will answer them and amplify. The first question is, why is karma necessary at all? The answer is, karma is the bending of the law of cause and effect until it becomes a teaching tool. It teaches man those things he needs to know so that he may move on up the U and out of the system. So then the next question is, what are the things man needs to know? And the answer, before man, the soul was enticed into the sphere by the passions, i.e. emotions, of the animal. Just viewing them in their everyday life was fine, but as some will, having free will, they began to manipulate those animals in a manner pleasing to them.